Hey good people, Batavia here. Welcome to Be Better Garden. October, we've made it. Fall is here. But as you've seen year over year, it's not uncommon for me to have still summer plants growing and the beginning of my kind of cool weather crops that I've planted or in some cases direct sowed. So we'll see how much growth we get out of those. We're heading into our average first frost date of November the 1st. Now for the cool weather crops, they all just won't stop growing once we get there. But we will see definitely a slowdown with the cooler temps, but more importantly, less light, less sunlight during the day. So I think we should do a traditional garden tour. Let's see what's in the garden and chat a bit about some of the things that we're expecting and some of the things that we're even still planning for. Let's dig in. Quick housekeeping items. Big thank yous to those who like, watch, comment, share, and subscribe to Be Better Garden. If you haven't subscribed already, consider it. There's a button below. And I think today we'll start in the backyard and then we'll move on to the front yard. Okie doke, so flowers really should live here, but I didn't get to it this year. And instead I did some radishes, I believe last month, and then direct sowed some cilantro in that other planter. So this was a test run of starting brassicas in the summer for the goal of planting them in the fall. And I have had trouble with growing brassicas, starting them from seed indoors, and I think I may have cracked the code. More to come on that in future videos. Green beans. So I'm a lover of green beans. As a child, I don't know if I'd ever thought I would say that, but we planted these out, direct sowed them in like the last week of July, and they've done really well. My goal is to do succession sowing for green beans using a couple of my green stalk planters. They really perform well. This is a really good spot for them on the deck as well. So I've never had green beans this late in the season in my Chicago garden, and to be able to harvest fresh green beans now, it's a true blessing. So shishito peppers, I'm just going to accept that every year I forget to harvest them while they're green. I want to do that blistering trick with them, and instead I end up letting them get red. Every red one I harvested this year was spicy, was hot. So Old Timesy Bonnie's Best plant. I wanted the tomatoes to get bigger. Don't know if that's more about the container and the fertilizing, or that's just the size that these tomatoes get. All of my tomato plants that are left are looking pretty beat up, so there is that. My container bench outperformed my expectations, so we'll come back around and take a closer look. They are a bit overgrown, but there's still some good herbs in there. So where the container bench lives this year is where my containers for peppers normally live. And they're right next to each other, so you wouldn't think there was much of a difference, but there absolutely was. This side of the fence gets hotter, basically. There's more sun exposure. And so I spent quite a bit of time hand watering these containers throughout the summer season, where I don't normally have to give that much attention to them. So I will keep that in mind next year. I don't know if I'll flip-flop them or what, but that's something to consider, meaning moving the peppers back on the other side and then the herbs back where the peppers are. But I imagine I would struggle with kind of the herbs getting dried out. So got to figure that out. But overall, this is the message. You can find space. If you have a yard, if you have a deck, if you have a porch, you can find space. Who would have thought you could grow this much along a fence line? This year I'm doing peppers and herbs and a tomato plant there, but this could be any number of things. You could do full-on spring plantings here. You can move into summer, and then if you play your cards right, you could even have some fall plantings along this itty-bitty space, right? So we're going to still dry some of these herbs. Stevia, there's some sage there. We have some mint, and then some basil. So ultimately we have the rest of the month for most of these herbs. I am curious about whether or not if I cut back the mint, if it's going to come back. I've had mint return in the past, so we'll see if that works out for these grow bags. Sweet potatoes. I'm going to show you what a flower arrangement that I made a few years back look like. I think for this huge container I'm going to return back to flowers.
I have a couple of sweet potato plants growing, so we'll see what we get out of that. But I think it's better used for flowers and adding a bit more beauty versus trying to grow food in there. We'll see. A lot of plans, a lot of thoughts for next year. So spinach that was direct sowed in August. Didn't quite work out as I expected or wanted to. So in this situation, I had things germinate. So it wasn't too hot for it to germinate, but the poor little seedlings just died off in that additional heat we experienced in September. So everything is set up for me to overwinter spinach. I may get in there and re-sow, but we'll see. Time is ticking away. So this is the last bit of like kind of the cluster of peppers. Jimmy Nardello. That is a really, it's as described. It's a really delicious and sweet pepper. And then I have a bell pepper plant that was transplanted so late in the season. I ended up moving it here to try to get as much sun exposure as I could. It was over there along the fence line with the rest of the peppers. And so then I have an orange bell. There was another banana pepper there. I have a jalapeno pepper tucked away somewhere in here as well. So we'll be harvesting those this month. Now this is one of those things where I know I talk about harvesting, I don't get around to it, but we're on the countdown. I don't have that many more non-frost days ahead of me. This bed, I'm teetering on planting my garlic for next year here. I've left this because as you can see, I still have some cucumber flowers, and I've been getting enough cucumbers to like add to salads, which is, you know, that's a win too. So the Vego garden bed, year one, oh, was it so productive, a true success. That was last year. This year, questionable at best, and it's absolutely based on the way that I set the bed up and the way that I loaded in the soil with that take on the hugelkultur method. I think the soil is settled, so I am optimistic about adding some additional rich soil for next year and then growing as I would expect this garden bed to produce. You know, I love a good DIY, especially using something that's super easy to manage like PVC pipe. So I just did this to cover the arugula because I find that the cabbage butterfly actually lays eggs and then the worms eat away at even my arugula, no matter when I plant it. So I have that covered. And I refreshed some of my green stalks. This is just like a lettuce mix meant to be harvested as baby leaves, so I basically sowed those. Whatever grows in there, I'll eat, you know, and then these will be ready for next year's growing season. And we planted or direct sowed these seeds together, so it's like 98% kale. I started off with a struggle because I didn't cover it, again, cabbage butterfly again, and the leaves are just eaten up as they were produced. So I got the insect netting, covered it, and they've been thriving ever since then. I plugged in a couple of mustard seeds and then I think maybe even a collard green start that I had. So there are a couple other things growing in that space. Another green stalk that I transplanted all of these plants. So lettuce, I started back in, I think July or August indoors, transplanted it out. But the rest of these are like from the spring when I started things. Celery, Swiss chard. There are a couple of herbs. I think there's some thyme down there. And then I refreshed the black planter. And for this one, we're just doing spinach for fall harvest. This is the only planter that I didn't come back around and replant. And we're just going to let it live its last days as it is. So I won't know whether or not this was the best decision ever or an epic fail when it comes to planting the sweet potatoes inside of the cage baby until I actually harvest them. So they are doing what sweet potato vines do, run all over the place. So we'll see what the production is like for this crop. Since things are cooled down just a bit, I had these beets that were planted way back in late spring, early summer. They're finally putting on a little bit of size. So those are the golden beets. One more for a future video about what went well and what didn't go as well as expected. I love this idea of having this green stalk in here. it is on a spinner, but based on what I'm growing, it's hard to spin it. And that's probably the only downside. So this is really where I planted the sweet potato. So, but you can see how much they run. The green bean, spoiler for that future video, not a good idea in here. I just couldn't get to them as often as I wanted to. And you know, for green beans, if you don't harvest it, I do now believe that it can stunt the continued growth of the plants. Mad Hatter, I was gifted pepper plant, and it's been slow. It's finally putting on some mature peppers. They're finally getting to the color red. Black strawberry. I don't know. We'll decide if I grow this again next year. I really liked the tomato plant and the tomato and how it tasted, but that size tomato is always a little bit harder to work with for me in my space when it comes to getting into the kitchen. So let's drink up the beauty of these collard greens. I did plant out some small starts, and we'll see them in just a few minutes in the front yard garden. They're not doing that well. They've struggled a bit in the front yard, but these still look wonderful. About time to harvest, I think. All right, so the front yard is an embarrassment when it comes to the state of things, but that's kind of my story at the end of the growing season. So I'm accepting this is what it's going to be. So these are the last of the tomato plants, and there are more leaves and vines than there are tomatoes. I'll need to figure out what to use and plant in that space next year, because it's just in such a unique space in the garden. On the other side of the porch, it doesn't get that much light. We'll see. Those were the I think more lettuce that I direct sowed because of the pea fail that I had when I tried to sow those in August. Yep, it's a jungle in there. So my honey nut squash I'm waiting for it to fully ripen on the vine as you want. You can see I'm piercing it to see if it has any give there. If my nail would have went into it, that would mean that it still has some ripening to do. So best laid plans, these were supposed to be mustards. One more round of didn't get my timing right, and then I had some creatures digging up some of the seedlings. All right, so let's get to the last of the plantings. Okra, I don't know if it really did what I wanted it to do this year. So I have the shorter variety, and then your typical Clemson. And once we get to September, October, the squirrels are busy in my area more so than ever before, where they are eating just about everything. So they're eating not only the sunflowers, which, you know, the few I have left, they're eating those, but they're also eating the flowers on the okra, which I've not seen before, but, you know, it's that time of year. So these are the collard transplants. This is another set of transplants I started indoors. So the goal here was just to get a healthy seedling. And I think I did this this is the second round that in this round made it. I don't think the seedlings are strong enough. I came back a few days later and yeah, they have been either eaten up or shriveled up. Lettuce I transplanted, same story with the row behind it with spinach that germinated, then dried up and died. Oh yeah, the fall plantings. I can't even say with 100% certainty that I figured it out, but I feel like I'm closer as I think about next year. I'm closer to figuring out timing and then even what crops I want to grow in the fall. So it's funny looking at this space where it's so vibrant, had so much color in it, and I'm still going to be proud of it because this is the first time I've ever been able to get like any remnants of fall flowers planted. And then plus we still have a few cucumbers that are producing. I mean, we're back to the place of like, I would normally buy a cucumber, you know, a week or something. And so we're producing maybe 2 or 3 a week. It won't last long, but I'm enjoying it while it lasts. I appreciate y'all spending some time with me. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to drop them below. And I look forward to seeing y'all on the next one.